The Times has revealed Andrew Mountbatten Windsor agreed to leave Royal Lodge after losing the loyalty of his ex-wife and closest ally Sarah Ferguson. The former Duke and Duchess of York are to finally separate nearly 30 years after their divorce. It's understood Ferguson will not join Andrew when he moves to a private property on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. The pair have been living together at the 30-room Royal Lodge in Windsor for almost 2 decades. It comes after the King stripped his younger brother of his titles and grace and favour mansion over his relationship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. The royal commentator Rupert Bell told Times Radio Andrew may now live a hermit lifestyle.
What will he be able to do? Yes, we've seen him riding around Windsor Park. I assume there's plenty of opportunity to do that, but the King wants to control what he does, because what he's been doing over the last few years, it's been a runaway train. And unfortunately, that has then brought disgrace upon what it feels like other members of the royal family.
Andrew has denied all allegations against him. Rachel Reeves is reportedly planning a tax raid on the owners of expensive homes in her upcoming budget. New higher bands of council tax are believed to be seen as the most effective method of raising billions of pounds for the Treasury. Other options, including a new levy on the value of homes or imposing capital gains tax on high-end property sales, are seen as less likely. The Chancellor has revealed higher taxes on the wealthy will be a part of the story in the budget later this month. Thousands of Jamaicans remain without electricity and in need of aid in the wake of Hurricane Melissa. 19 people have reportedly died on the island, with 49 confirmed deaths across the Caribbean following the storm. Melissa destroyed crops and buildings, along with displacing hundreds of families. The UK government has announced it will provide another £5 million worth of aid to the region. Olga Izaza is working with UNICEF in Jamaica.
Authorities are working hard to clean up all the roads, but it's very, very difficult to access. And we are seeing the people with anxiety trying to reach their relatives, their parents.
The Speaker of the House of Commons says he's unable to bring a private prosecution against 2 men accused of spying for China after receiving legal advice. Sir Lindsay Hoyle says he's still angry that charges were dropped against the pair. They've always denied wrongdoing after being accused of passing information to Beijing for just over a year from December of 2021. And schools will have to teach separate sciences at GCSE under government plans to boost social mobility. Fewer than 25% of pupils sit physics, chemistry and biology as individual exams, with most taking combined science equivalent to 2 GCSEs. Almost 1 in 10 schools do not offer triple science due to a national shortage of physics teachers. A review of the curriculum is expected to call for reform because more children from affluent areas take separate sciences that lead to science A-levels and lucrative careers. And for a news bulletin when you want it, search for the Times News Briefing on the Times Radio app.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker.
Times Radio Breakfast with Handelsbanken.
It's 5 minutes past 7. Good morning. You're in the company of Callum MacDonald and me, Rosie Wright, sitting in for Chloe Tilley this weekend for Times Radio Breakfast. Well, this morning we're looking at the latest royal repercussions after the King, showing some real steel, stripped Andrew Mountbatten Windsor of his prince title. The Times is reporting today that Andrew finally agreed to leave Royal Lodge, and I think he might not actually move out for about a year, but he made the sort of reluctant acceptance that he had to go after it was clear his closest ally, his former wife, Sarah Ferguson, had deserted him. They will now properly separate and live independently for the first time in 30 years. Today, though, the broader questions mount as the King tries to draw a line in the sand. Does it raise the spectre of republicanism in Britain? How's the news gone down across the Commonwealth? And now that Andrew is a commoner, like you and me, without the protection of the royal family, is this really the end of the scandal?
On the conveyor belt of ideas that may become reality in just a few weeks' time at the budget, council tax gets attention today. Rachel Reeves is reported to be planning a budget tax raid on the owners of expensive homes with new higher bands of council tax, as one idea being floated by the Treasury as a way to raise up to £10 billion for the Exchequer. Property experts see it as the least worst option of the ideas floated for taxing mansions, what we hear as political shorthand for expensive homes. We know our council tax bands are outdated. They're based on 1991 valuations. So could a supercharged council tax be coming? We'll ask the experts and we'll help you understand the implications.
Basically, how much might your council tax go up? And as you relax into the weekend, we are so often enticed by the idea of having a longer one. Well, South Cambridgeshire Council trialled a 4-day week. They hailed it as pretty much a success. However, the impartiality of the independent body who heralded the trial has been called into question, and the government have made very clear they're not supportive of the idea of working 4 days, not 5. However, they've got no control, actually, of how local councils choose to deploy their staff. So we're going to debate with someone working on that council as well if 4 days for the price of 5 actually works in practice. Also on the programme, how clunkingly obvious product placement is stealing screen time on our Saturday night TV, and how you can avoid the £100,000 tax trap.
Do keep in touch with us this morning with all of your thoughts and your analysis. Add to the conversation by texting 87222 and start your message with the word Times, or you can WhatsApp us on 0333 003 2353.
OK. 8 minutes past 7, The Times reveals this morning that the former House of York will be divided for the first time in 30 years, as Sarah Ferguson will not be joining Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor in Sandringham. Sarah Ferguson's understood to have made clear she was prepared to leave Royal Lodge. There are reports that Andrew had been in line for a £500,000 payoff to leave the mansion, but that could be reduced because of a huge repair bill for the property. Well, with us now is Ed Owens, royal historian and author of After Elizabeth, Can the Monarchy Save Itself?, to talk about what next for the monarchy. Ed, good morning.
Very good morning to you.
Shall we just start with that potential £500,000 payoff that Andrew could have been in line for? I wonder, with what has happened over the last, 24 hours and the last month or so, if we may be entering an era where there is far more transparency about the royals' finances.
I think we are. I think that's going to be one of the great outcomes of the recent events. We already know, for example, that William and Kate, who are moving into a new home on the Windsor estate this month called Forest Lodge, that they've been very transparent in making clear to the public that they will be paying market rents for that accommodation. And I think they've done so in direct contrast with what happened with Andrew.
You mentioned that would be a great outcome. What are other potential great outcomes for the royal family as a result of the quite steely decision from the King this week?
Well, I think what the King was clearly aiming for in taking the firm and decisive action that he did was to draw a line in the sand here. I think that there was a lot of anxiety at Buckingham Palace regarding where this could go next. Politicians were calling for debates in the House of Commons regarding the behaviour of members of the royal family. Again, this goes against the tradition of what is meant to take place in Westminster. Likewise, we know there was a lot of public discontent with Andrew as well, calling for investigations by the police into his behaviour. I think the King will hope that this will take the heat out of this situation, and that both public and political demands for some kind of greater investigation, greater discussion around Andrew's behaviour will now fade away.
Do you think the King thinks that Andrew's guilty?
I don't know, and I'm loath to speculate. What I would suggest is that clearly in the communication that was issued on Wednesday evening, the King and Queen articulated a genuine sympathy and concern for victims of sexual violence, and we know that that the wider context here is that Queen Camilla, also the Duchess of Edinburgh, have done much work to support the victims of domestic violence, but also sexual abuse as well. And I think they want to make very clear that they have no toleration of this, irrespective of what exactly Andrew has done.
The last time there was sort of a crisis of public opinion to this scale, I think probably would have been the aftermath of Princess Diana. Do you think that's a fair comparison to start with? And how do you think the royal family have learned about how to deal with a moment when they realise we've kind of lost the room?
Yeah, this is definitely one of the three biggest, if you like, scandals of the last 100 years, going back to 36, the abdication crisis, then 1997 with Princess Diana's death, and now this scandal involving Andrew and his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. With regards to Princess Diana, what the British royal family learnt there was that they needed to be more emotive, that the Queen in particular was very distant, very aloof. Following the death of Diana, the public detected a real distance in terms of that relationship, and they, the British tabloids, but the public more widely, called for a greater sort of expression of grief, of sympathy for other members of the family. And the Queen did change her public image when it came to her public language, future speeches. She spoke more emotionally about things in general. It was after this moment that she started hosting parties at the palace. It was after this moment that she started associating herself with James Bond and Paddington Bear. So, there was a real emphasis post-Diana for the Queen to present a warmer, more friendly public image to the public, because that was what was lost in that moment in the middle 1990s. The institution looked cold, distant, aloof, and impersonal, and the Queen had to transform that after Diana's death.
And there's certainly within this story a complete lack of warmth and friendliness. There's absolute horror, and it's just so much frustration, actually, that there are so many questions that haven't yet been answered. Questions that Andrew himself may be able to shed some light on. Presumably, losing his title, and he's still 8th in line to the throne, and some people are questioning sort of why he should still hold that position. Of course, very unlikely to be king, but he could be. Though those questions aren't going to go away, though, that Andrew could help answer. And now, as a commoner, I guess he is out of the protection of the royal family, where he could be called to the US to give evidence, or could be questioned by the police. Do you imagine that all happening now?
Well, I think, again, this was why the downgrading of his status from prince to commoner was so important. The king was essentially putting distance between himself and his brother. And if due process will follow, it will follow because Andrew is a commoner. He will not be protected by any other form of status that he previously held. It is possible that he is questioned by police or in the United Kingdom or the authorities in the United States. Whether he presents himself for such discussions, for such investigation, remains to be seen. But this is, I think, the unanswered question of the moment: is how much further can this go? How much further can Andrew fall potentially? And what impact could this have on the reputation of the institution? Of course, the king has sought to protect the institution, but will he have managed to do so? We will see.
It's an institution that is based fundamentally on sort of Christian family values. Andrew has by far fallen short of all of that. Disgrace. How much damage has it done, do you think, in the public side to the reputation of the monarchy? And does that actually raise the sort of spectre of republicanism?
Well, it is the hypocrisy at the heart of this entire debacle. The British monarchy, the House of Windsor, have over more than 100 years presented themselves as, if you like, the moral focal point of the nation, as if you like, the supreme family that exemplifies British family values. And we see that even now, for example, in relation to Prince William and Catherine's public image, a very family-centred vision. But what we have seen time and time again, whether it's with the abdication crisis, whether it's in relation to Princess Margaret and the collapse of her marriage, whether it's in relation to Charles and Diana's, the breakdown of their marriage, and now with Andrew, is that there is a hypocrisy here. On the one hand, the monarchy projects family values, but in reality, they struggle to live up to those moral values. And I think this is where, if you like, that moral message, it rings hollow. And it does cause problems for the British monarchy. And I think where the real problem lies is among a younger generation who can't stand that kind of hypocrisy. And I think when we look at the public opinion polls, the monarchy is in a genuinely difficult position. It's never been, never had opinion polls like this. At the same time, republicanism is not a strong force in the United Kingdom. What I would suggest is that there is a lot of discontent with the current royal status quo, but that doesn't necessarily feed directly into calls for an elected head of state. So I would be cautious about saying that republicanism is on the rise, but nevertheless, monarchism is on the fall.
Ed Owens, thank you. The royal historian, also author of After Elizabeth, Can the Monarchy Save Itself? And arguably that question got even more challenging with the introduction of all the allegations around Andrew, allegations he denies.
There are a few new sort of threads to the story of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as well. It's reported in the Times that he told Jeffrey Epstein that it would be, quote, good to catch up in person months before they met in New York in 2010. These are new emails released yesterday. Epstein, who had been released from a prison sentence for soliciting prostitution from a minor in July 2009, had written to Andrew suggesting that he meet an associate. And then on April the 15th of that year, Andrew replied, he'd love to, but he's heading elsewhere. It goes on. I'll look and see if I can make a couple of days before the summer work in New York. It would be good to catch up in person. So just getting at the kind of closeness of the two. It's a new detail. The other part of the story, I think, today that we should mention, it's on the front of the Eye Weekend. Andrew to get £558,000 payout for Royal Lodge, but faces a huge repair bill. So compensation would be reduced